And we are live. Please confirm on the chat that you can see us and hear us well.
Hi, everybody.
Yep. So it looks like we're live. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for being so patient. I guess you don't have any plans for Friday evening, right? So I'm here with Stanley from Anicca, which is a word for that states impermanence, right, Anne?
Yes.
Let me introduce you a bit and then the stage is yours. So Stanley is a digital marketing trainer and consultant at various events and seminars with long experience in paid media, search and analytics. She has developed a platform called A10 Digital Marketing Framework, ideal for designing digital marketing strategies for their company's clients. And thanks a lot for joining us, and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, guys. It's a pleasure to be here. You can see by the picture that's our office, which unfortunately we're not in. Usually this time on a Friday evening, we'd be having a few drinks. It was an old pub. So a little bit about myself. I've been in digital marketing since, nearly 20 years now. I'm from Leicester. I was trained as a scientist. You can see various pictures of my team and my family, which I'm not getting to see very much of. I'm a bit of a rock fan, and I'm also a Formula One fan, which is quite frustrating at the moment because I can't see either. And you can also see my cats there as well. So let's dive in. I've got quite a lot to cover today. What I'm going to be doing for the people that are not used to creating audiences is just giving you a little bit of a background of how to create audience across various paid media platforms. And then I'm going to talk about creating your own audiences and your own remarketing strategies. Dennis was talking about this earlier on. You know, if you've got a list of people on an email list, you can create your own audience. And then I'm going to talk about some advanced audience strategies. And I'm going to go through various different ways of manipulating audiences so that you can get the best out of your paid media. I'm probably going to run out of time by then, but as it's an e-commerce summit, I've also got some stuff for remarketing with shopping ads. So if we don't get all of it, you'll be able to pick the slides up later. And there's some really interesting stuff in there about how to negative out your existing customers. Okay, so this is going to be a fast journey. Like Jono, who I know very well, I talk quite quickly, but hopefully you'll be able to pick all this up and replay it on a slower speed. Let's see how we get on. So first of all, if you're not familiar with creating audiences, you can create audiences both paid search and paid social. And this tends to be based on, targeting tends to be based on both contextual and audiences. So we don't really need to worry too much about contextual advertising today. So I'm going to slip straight into audience targeting. And these are the main ways that you can create an audience in Google Ads and in some case in Bing Ads as well. So you've got the automatically generated ones. You've got the user-based ones, which is what most people are interested in. You've got ones that are based on the pixel, which we generally create in analytics. So this is going to be web or app-based. You've got uploaded lists, which in Google is called customer match. Although you do have to be very careful, there's quite tight limitations on customer match in Google with the size of the audience and also how long you've been running your account and how much you spend. And then you can also link a range of other channels, including things like YouTube. So you can use YouTube as a sort of way of funneling the viewers, and then if they've viewed a video, you can then go on and remarket to them in Google. So there's lots of different things you can do. And the other thing about audiences is that once you've created an audience, you can actually create similar audiences or lookalike audiences, as they're called in Facebook. And these are audiences that are similar to the ones that you want to target. So these could be your uploaded list of converters, or they could be the people that have visited your thank you page after a sale or a form fill. And nearly all of the platforms now offer some form of similar or lookalike audience. These are some of the user-based audiences that you can use in Google and in Bing. And when I actually share the slides, I've got quite a lot of more detail on each of these, so you can use this as a reference. And you can see that in most campaigns in Google Ads, you can overlay demographic demographic segments. And also in quite a lot of them, you can also overlay various other audiences. And these tend to be pretty much common across all the platforms now, whether it's YouTube, display, and remarketing, and Google search, sorry. In paid social, there's even more choices. And this is because you can create new audiences based on a whole loads of selections. You can also have your customer or your matched audiences, which is using your data. And then in addition to that, you can also create lookalike audiences. Now, one of the things that you can do particularly in Facebook and Instagram, and to a certain extent in Twitter, is that you can actually create audience based on what they've interacted with you on that platform. So this could be watching a video view, or if they've liked or commented on a post that you've created. And this is really good for creating sequential campaigns, which we'll talk about later. When you're choosing your platform, this is a social media platform, you're going to have quite a lot of things you're going to take into consideration. And one of them will be the targeting options. There will be other things, because obviously people are doing different things on different platforms at different time basis, but you should be able to choose a platform based on various different interests and demographics. And there's a little bit of a belief that really you can't use Facebook for B2B, but actually we've had lots of success of using Facebook and Instagram for B2B. So don't always make assumptions that these audiences aren't using these platforms, because sometimes they're going to be interested in things even when they're off in their spare time. And of course, we've got a lot of that at the moment. I've got quite a lot of slides which just go through the different targeting options. I'm not going to deal with this in too much detail. I'm just going to flick through these, and then you can look at them later on. But you'll notice that in all cases, they've got some form of demographic, some sort of behavior, some sort of interest-based targeting. And the more complex the targeting options, then that means you can just do more sophisticated things. Some of this has been limited by the GDPR regulations, and we haven't got quite as many choices as we used to. And often you have to use what we call proxies. So if you want to find people that are maybe high affluence, then you have to look for the sorts of things they might be doing or be interested in, rather than being able to target them in the same way that we could 2 years ago. I've included a couple of the other platforms in here, such as Snapchat and Pinterest, which I think would be of interest as well, because as this is e-commerce focused summit, these are platforms that you should definitely be considering in your paid strategy. One of the big powerful things about social media, and to a lesser extent paid search and display, is the ability to create your own audiences and use remarketing strategies. So I just wanted to go through a bit of an overview of some of the terminology that's used. And if you've not done anything before, it does get a little bit confusing. The sort of default option is quite often called custom audiences. Facebook and obviously Instagram and Messenger use this. Google and Bing use this. And then LinkedIn uses matched audiences, tailored audiences, Twitter, and Quora uses the audience targeting name. These are the main ways that you can create an audience, and we've already mentioned these. So a lot of people will upload an email list. You can also integrate it with your CRM system. You can tag your site. And what I would recommend is even if you aren't thinking about using Facebook because you're targeting mainly in LinkedIn, it's worth putting all the pixels in through something like Google Tag Manager, because you can be building audiences even if you're not actually using them for any ads. And I would definitely recommend that, because you'll see with some of the advanced strategies, they work really well together, and you can actually do quite a lot of cross-channel remarketing as part of your strategies. Within the platform is some of the stuff that you're going to do for sequential marketing. And again, you can create lookalike audiences in order to expand your audience. So website retargeting, which most people will be fully aware of, is where you add the pixel to the site. And within the social media platforms particularly, you're going to be using combinations of pages based on things like they visited a certain category page, they might have gone to visit the jeans page, but they didn't go to the thank you page. So you can make different combinations, and then you can then understand their behavior and then target them later on using various different ad platforms. This is a summary of the different mechanisms and different terminology. This is quite a useful table. It is really confusing when you start this, of understanding which ones refer to which and which ones you can use in which. It's also quite useful because it gives you an idea of the minimum audience size. And this is particularly a problem in Google because there's a minimum audience of 1,000. And sometimes if you're trying to target very niche audiences in LinkedIn, having an audience of 300 can be a bit problematic. One of the things I would comment on at this stage is if you are going to be using uploaded lists, we normally find you only get a match rate of about 1/3 or 50% if you're lucky. So if you are trying to upload a list of 1,000 in Google, you're going to need 3,000 or 4,000 before you're going to meet the minimum requirements. And there are other limitations with customer match, as I mentioned earlier. Some of my advanced strategies are about mixing and matching these different techniques. So I'm going to just walk through each of these. So the first one is audience niches. And this is particularly useful, for example, if you're trying to target B2B audiences and particularly very specific job titles of very specific industries. We do a lot of stuff in what I would call the high-tech industries, a lot in pharmaceuticals, a lot in high engineering and manufacturing. And this is particularly relevant in these audiences where you need to find very, very niche particular job titles and interests and sectors. Now, the way I've described this is that if you imagine you're trying to target the blue guys and you're going in Facebook, you can go for a sort of a general B2B audience. So maybe something like an HR manager or a marketing manager, and there's a reasonable number of them in there. So within Facebook, you can target on things like job title and interest and demographics. And you can also target on a few other things like university. But you're not going to have the same degree of targeting as you are with LinkedIn, where you can put things like company size and the sector. So using a technique like this, what you're going to probably find is you're going to get a reasonable size audience, and you're going to get a few people that are not so relevant. They're maybe not exactly who you're looking for. So for example, if you were in events management, you might be thinking, oh, well, I might be able to target marketing managers because they probably run events. But actually, this way, you're going to get people that are marketing managers, but they're not responsible for event management. So there might be a little bit of wastage in there. Now, if you look at a very niche B2B audience, which we've got on the right, you'll see that there's actually very few of these little blue dots. And this is where you have to be much, much more targeted. And LinkedIn is really very good at this. And also, you can also add negative audiences as well. Now, this is where I think skills is particularly powerful, because you can target on literally thousands of skills, and sometimes skills is going to get to the right people when the job title isn't. So, for example, in my previous example, you might be a marketing manager, but actually you're responsible for running events. And although it's not in your job title, it is actually part of what you want to do, and you could be very important for my particular niche. I may also be looking for companies of certain sizes as well. So it's really important that I add an overlay company factors as well as just the individuals. And so I can build up and layer my audience according to these different characteristics. And then I can get a much more niche audience, which I can then target. Now, the problem with niche audiences in LinkedIn is they can be quite expensive. The smaller the audience in most social media platforms, is that often they are very, very expensive to target. And generally, for example, in the UK, we're talking plus £5 for most clicks anyway. So quite often it's useful to use this niche targeting in LinkedIn to then get them to engage with you in something like a video or some form of content that they go over to your website. And then you can remarket to them again using one of the other techniques. And this is particularly powerful if you've got a content magnet, such as the A10 marketing framework, where we could target the right people, get them over to the website, and then we could remarket to them through other processes such as Facebook ads, or we could even use email marketing to target them later on. So my second technique is audience amplification, and this is pretty obviously lookalike and similar audiences. But what I'm doing here is I'm creating a small seed list, and then I'm using more sophisticated audience criteria to actually create my lookalike and my amplification. So again, we are using lookalikes, and you can see on the right hand side where you can create different audiences created by create different custom audiences. And what we can do is use other value criteria using some of the custom conversions that you've created when you added the pixel onto the site. So this can be things like the value of the purchase, the frequency of the purchase. You can even use some event tags to do things like this. So it could be time spent on site, percentage of the video that's watched, and that would be done by using the engagement figures within, for example, Facebook. And then things of groups of specific pages that they've actually looked at. This will then create lookalike audiences that are a bit more focused, a bit more targeted, and it's all based on the action rather than just the fact that they've bought from you. You can be a little bit more detailed. Audience reduction is using negative audiences to focus on a more target budget. Now, this is quite obvious, and most people are aware of the concept of using negative audiences, but to be perfectly honest, nearly every campaign we look at has never got a negative audience in it. And quite often the people you should be adding as your negative audiences are the ones from the other campaigns. And this is particularly important if you're setting up a funnel and you've got prospecting or remarketing going on. You don't want your prospect audiences to appear in your remarketing campaign unless they've engaged with you. And likewise, you don't want your customers to appear as and see your ads if you're targeting them and they've already bought from you. So being a bit more sophisticated with your negative audiences can be quite powerful. And it basically means that you can work out who you want to target, exclude the people you don't want to target, and then end up with a list of your ideal people that you want to prospect. Now, although getting a smaller audience does mean that quite often it is a more expensive, it's really important to do this if you're paying on a CPM basis, because then you're going to be getting a lot less wastage. So we always recommend, particularly with videos or awareness campaigns, you make sure you include as many exclude audiences as you possibly can in order to get as a granular and as good an audience as you possibly can. Audience filtration. Now, this is the more interesting stuff that we like to do, and it's really started to be about trying to filter down people that are more engaged with you and actually narrow it down and then spend most of your marketing budget at the lower level. And this is particularly good if you can use a cheaper form of traffic to do the original filtering, and then you can then have a more direct method such as maybe Google ads or Google shopping ads to do the actual remarketing and do the conversion piece. So what we're trying to do here is target a more generic audience. And what you want to do is you want to try and get to that audience pretty cheaply using something like video or awareness ads, or even can be even offline, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then what you're then trying to do is use something like a conversion ad or a lead generation ad to actually only engage with the people that have watched some of your video or engaged with the original ad. And this is really taking them down the different steps of the funnel and basically filtering down and targeting your more expensive ads on a smaller audience, which you know are much hotter. This is a way of describing this. So I've got my generic audience at the beginning with my blue targets. And because it's a two-step phase, what I'm basically doing is using each step to filter down. So the first step would be an engagement or a video campaign. And you can do this in two ways. You can actually do it by watching the content on the platform. And of course, then you can use some secondary campaign that's based on who's viewed that video or viewed that content. Or if you can, get them to go over to your website, because at that point, as soon as they hit the website, you can then pixel them, and then you can use secondary channels such as shopping ads or something else to actually hit them with the conversion point in the next stage. So the first step is to narrow them down using cheap traffic and to really make sure you're engaging with the right audience. And then the second stage is the conversion ad, which again could be a lead conversion ad on the platform, or could be getting them over to your website where you are going to actually get them to convert or buy your product. You can do this with LinkedIn as well. So this is what I was saying about earlier on about combining these different techniques. So you could, for example, combine the niche technique and narrow down your very specific audience, and then remarket to them, secondly, using one of the other channels. Another way of using audience targeting together is audience priming. This is when you use a cheaper or broadcast channels to drive users to your site, so you can then retarget to them when they're ready to buy. We've previously called this honeypots, because what we're trying to do here is we're trying to use very cheap channels such as low-cost Facebook, video views, maybe Pinterest, to get them over to your site. And then you can create retargeting lists, for example, using the UTM code or a vanity page with a specific URL. And then you can focus your marketing budget specifically on that target. And it might be that in very competitive areas, for example, if you were targeting garden furniture at the moment, and you only sold very expensive garden furniture, that you'd use something like a really nice guide to buying garden furniture, get them across to your site, and then when they are then searching for garden furniture, you'd only focus on those people using RLSAs. And that's basically because they're back in the market, they're much more likely to interact. You can then increase your bid and make sure, or even just target these guys so that most of your advertising budget goes onto that specific audience. Another thing you can do is combine on and offline channels or organic channels such as search. So if you get a lot of traffic through something like a guide, or you've got a great blog, there's no reason why you can't use that to create channels and remarketing audience that you can then target by maybe sending them back to the retailer, or by using leads for the sales team, or by actually doing RLSAs and getting them ready to buy. Now, you can use some broadcast. I mean, in UK, we've got something called AdSmart, which is like a programmatic TV ad, which is very, very cost effective. And if you have a vanity page, so they go to a specific landing page associated with that campaign, then you can use that through analytics to create an audience, which you can then use to target in something like Google Shopping, RLSAs, or even display. This is really the idea of using these sort of sequential campaigns. So this is similar to the slide above, but we're including a multi-phased approach, which could looking at the different stages of the funnel. So you're using various different techniques for awareness. This could be a mix of display, it could be YouTube, it could be digital TV. And then what you're then doing is taking them to either a product page or a content page, which will allow them to be pixeled. You can cookie them, and then when they're actually at the point that they want to buy, you can then target them in something like search by targeting the audience pools that you've taken through each of these different stages. This is the concept of honeypots, which I was talking about earlier, where you use different sources of traffic, trying to get really the audience you're looking at. You get them across to your site, you tag them, you create a list, and then you do your remarketing in Google Ads. You can see this has been something we've been doing for a while, because obviously I've mentioned Google AdWords there. And then, of course, they convert later on. The last section I wanted to do was talking about remarketing and audience targeting, specifically with shopping ads, which I'm sure many of you are using. And this is what we are particularly interested in, is using cross-channel remarketing strategies for e-commerce. I'm sure that I'm running out of time. I haven't got Valentine waving at me yet, but some of the good ones that we've used very successfully for e-commerce is based on video views on YouTube. So if you link your YouTube channel with your Google Ads account, you can do that. We can also use targeted audience, which is the honeypots we were talking about, from Facebook, and then RLSAs. We can use the vanity pages for things like radio, TV, or out-of-home ads. We can use things like cart abandonment, so that we show ads to direct them to purchase on Amazon. Now, this might seem to be a strange combination, but if somebody's abandoned on your website, it may be that there's something wrong with your site and your site isn't as good as they're used to. And actually, if they're not really happy with the way your site converts, then get them to purchase over in Amazon. At least you get the sale, and you then could still benefit from that. There's lots of other things you can do. You can, what we tend to do is, if we've got very engaged audiences, they might have come from LinkedIn or from Google Ads, we can often remarket to them because there's lots less restrictions in Facebook. And one of the most interesting ones is actually uploading names and addresses from Amazon and eBay. So even though you might not have your email list, it is likely that you could be able to match them. Another thing that we've done, which is really important for retention, is if you've got a service such as a SaaS service or contract such as utility or phone, at the end of the year, there's going to be a huge number of people that potentially could default or cancel their contract. So these are the guys that we really want to renew. So we can upload those lists and then target them in Facebook and Instagram because it's quite cost effective. RLS tactics using shopping ads are a little bit more difficult. You can do a few things. You can create some interest groups, and you can create some lists based on URL and UTM codes. And you can overlay the audiences, particularly if you are using multiple campaigns for sculpting, or you can just clone the campaign and just use it for RLSA. Another thing you can do is just overlay the audiences and review the performance and see whether you need to modify any bids. And then if you do find any audiences that are particularly successful, then you can create similar audiences for those high performers. There's quite a few useful audiences for e-commerce remarketing, and these are often based on things like you're converting customers, visitors to thank you pages. You can use it for the cart abandoners. You can look at different returning and users versus new users, because of course sometimes they're going to benefit from a bid modifier. You might want to use views based on category or product pages, and this could be at the URL level or subdirectory level, or if you've got dynamic remarketing set up using a data layer, then it could be at the specific product level. You can also do things based on the value of the sales over specific periods, how often they buy, and any other things like engagement metrics or showcase ad views. There's quite a lot of choices in there that you could consider if you're just using remarketing for e-commerce. In addition to using remarketing based actually on pages and uploaded lists, you can also look at it for content and content views and events. This is event tracking and analytics. So you can also view if they've watched video content on your page, if they've downloaded stuff, and where they've got to in the cart. So because we can create such sophisticated audiences with analytics, it's possible to use events as well as specific URL visits as well. Excluding audiences in shopping is more difficult, although you might want to exclude current customers and you might want to exclude visitors that buy low value items. But at the moment, you can't exclude an audience in shopping unless it's changed in the last few weeks. I'm not aware of this. So you tend to have to use workarounds. So we've got a couple that you can consider. You can target non-customers, but the trouble with that is your ads won't be seen by new users. You could do a 90% bid modifier for customers. And you can use some sculpting techniques with the 3 campaigns, which I'll show you on the next slide. Most of you will be aware of the concept of using priority settings and different bids and negatives to sculpt. And we tend to use this for brand versus generic campaigns. But in this case, what we're doing is we're playing around with our converters and our non-converters and using these as positive overlays. And then we're using the different priorities to try and funnel the clients in the different ways. So if they're a new user and they've never visited the site, they'll have a low priority setting. If they're a converter, there'll be the medium setting, and you'll have a very, very low bid on these. So effectively, you're using the bid to exclude your converters. And as it's so competitive, you're not likely to show the ads. And so your non-converters are going to be the ones that are going to be most likely to see the ads. And because they've visited the site before, it's quite likely that they're more likely to convert. This is just shown in this last slide, and I've just heard the signal for Valentine to start wrapping up. So I've got a couple of other slides just on dynamic remarketing. I'm sure most of you are already using that, but I would recommend, if you're not, you should consider smart ads, because you can increase performance. If any of you look me out on our site, you'll find I did a really interesting presentation at SMX on smart ads last year. And then unfortunately, dynamic remarketing isn't available in Bing. And then finally, just to let you know, we've got a professional digital marketing qualification that you might be interested, which combines CIM and the Digital Marketing Institute, which we are teaching virtually because we can't have the classroom sessions. And I've also got a load of freebies for you. So you can access our training material via the Academy site. We're doing some weekly seminars, and then we're also doing some one-hour consultancies if any of you need any help. So hopefully that will be useful, and there'll be something in there for everybody.
Perfect. Thanks a lot for being with us, Anne. And for everyone out there, there's the next session for you. We're gonna swap a bit. So the next session will be with Kurt Esther from Shopify Plus, at Ethercycle, and Andy Bedell, how to build a team that split tested his way to 7 figures. So, and again, thanks a lot for being part of e-commerce growth summit, and stay safe over there.
Thank you, Valentine. I'm sorry the screen went a bit dark. Hope to see you all soon.
Okay, all the best.
As an e-commerce manager, you want to stop spending money on expensive ads. OmniConvert Explore helps you improve conversion through A/B testing, personalization, and surveys. Understand that growth is also a matter of retention, not only acquisition. With OmniConvert Reveal, you'll understand segments, monitor customer experience, and nurture your customers on every channel.